This segment is on just the purl stitch alone. I've shown you how to do the knit stitch after casting on and how to bind off, and now it's time to incorporate one more basic stitch into your repertoire. I've cast on 10 stitches and I've already purled up one row, and I'm ready to go ahead and begin purling all of the stitches. If you'll recall, when we were doing the knit stitch, we were beginning with the yarn behind the needle, and we were going into the stitch this way. When we purl, we begin with the yarn in front, and this is where I think some people get a little hung up on, is how to manage this yarn that's in front and that you need to wrap around the needle. And the way I work that out is by making sure that this index finger pretty much does the work of just guiding the yarn and having enough tension between my finger and what's on the needle. I'll demonstrate that for you. So I've just kind of snugged up a little bit here. And so what we're going to do when we purl, we have our yarn in the front, and we want to come into this first stitch from the top, making the X, and then we bring the yarn over the needle and kind of swivel around so that it's kind of snug up against this right hand needle. And then we pull that stitch through, and keeping it kind of right up there next to the left hand needle. See in the back how this is what we just looped around the needle. Now this is the stitch that we went into. We're going to go ahead and pull it off at this point and hold on to that stitch in your left hand. That will give you some added tension and make it easier for that next stitch. So again, we're going to take our right needle and go into the top of that stitch and out the front, making the X. You have to really, when you're purling as a continental knitter, really push that needle through. Bring your finger back and let that right stick touch the left stick, and just pivot on back, still touching that stick, and pop that stitch off. You've purled 2 stitches. Let's do that again. I'm kind of scooching my yarn up the needle just a little bit, kind of holding it down with my thumb and keeping the tension on this finger. We bring the needle in from the top over the left hand needle, push it in there pretty far, kind of get that yarn around your right needle and pivot your finger forward, keeping the right needle in touch with the left, letting it slide right up the back, and pull off the next stitch. And your yarn is still in front. Sometimes people, when they're purling, can get a little bit confused about what's on the needle and what's off, and if they've actually made the loop. Remember, just if you keep your needles in contact like I do, in through the top, making your X, pivot your finger forward, keeping the right hand in contact with the left needle, and you'll see that I'm just guiding that needle up along the left hand needle as I pull the stitch off. And my yarn stays in front in preparation for the next purl stitch. So we in through the front, X, pivot and loop, and keep the needle in contact, and off. Hold on to what's on your right hand needle in order to keep that tension. In through the front, from the top, pivot your finger around, and just keep that needle in contact as you pull that stitch off. In through the top, pivot that finger around, keeping the needles in contact, and pull it off. Scooch a stitch up, keep your tension, hold on to your yarn, in through the top. You're going clockwise around that right needle as you keep your needles in contact and pull the next stitch off. Just 2 more. In through the top. You might have to use a finger sometimes to help that yarn along if you've lost a little tension like I have. Go ahead and just keep those needles in contact as you pull off your stitch. And last one. So I recommend that as you practice your knitting, you kind of get used to the idea of your finger pivoting back and forth like this, if you can do this, because that allows you to really work both the purl and the knit stitch. And I'm holding the needle under my hand like this to really kind of stabilize it with my thumb, and this finger does all of that yarn work. So let me point out here that when you do a purl stitch, what ends up on your needle are these, they look like collars on your stitch, okay? This is how you can read your knitting and know that you have purl stitches on them. The very opposite stitch of a purl stitch is the knit stitch. So if you look at the other side of the work, you don't have collars around these stitches. You have what looks like an open shirt front, a little V coming down in front of it. Okay, so that's the difference. Open necktie is your knit stitch, and on the opposite, these collars are your purl stitches. And I want you to learn how to read your knitting so that you can anticipate what is coming up on your stitches. In the next segment, I'm going to show you how to combine knit and purl stitches to create what we call ribbing.